The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
I sincerely hope you guys all got a chance to listen to the box score breakdown last night. Don't tell me you didn't have time to do it. Don't you tell me that. I know you've come to love Fantasy NBA Today, but I am here to tell you that the box score breakdown is where you need to be laser focusing your efforts before you go to sleep at night or first thing in the morning. It is out. It is rumbling. Adrian Benjamins, Neil Rochlani taking care of business. They put out a show last night with the first iteration this time around of in-season statistics. And I'm thrilled to say you guys are finding it so far. I hope you'll continue to do so. It is a great podcast, and it's going to be even more important tonight, when they break down all of the massive Wednesday card. Wanted to hit you with that before we got into anything else. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. I am Dan Bespris. It's Wednesday, so I have a few things on tap. Hear me out on this one. I got a few things on tap. First of all, you can find me on Twitter at Dan Bespris, DanBesbris. If you can spell it, you can find me. That's the old adage. This is a Hoop Ball presentation at Hoop Ball Fantasy, at Hoop Ball Tweets on Twitter. Go follow them out, or go to hoop-ball.com. A lot of things to go over today. Number one, we had our first evening of NBA action since the end of the finals. The Celtics creamed the 76ers. The Warriors got out in front of the Thunder and then ended up kind of hanging on a little bit to the Westbrook-less Thunder, I should say. So that's in the rear view. We'll want to take a look at that. Two, Mailbag. Wanted to take a few questions from the Mailbag. A lot of them focused on one main position battle from last night's results, so we'll get into that. Three, I do want to kind of set the stage a little bit for you here on today's show. This, by the way, not necessarily the order you're about to hear this stuff. I want to set the stage because this is the first show since the season started. I think we have a lot of new listeners to the podcast right now. Welcome. We're thrilled to have you. And I want to give you an idea of how things are going to work now that games are happening. So we'll do a little bit of a rundown here towards the beginning of the podcast. We have gambling lines. Those are starting to come out, which is a big deal, right? We need to keep an eye on those. We have the games coming up this coming evening. That's a thing. We've got guests coming up over the next few days of the podcast. There's like a million things I want to try to talk about on today's show, and I want to try to do it in under an hour. Heaven help us. We will do our best. So, first thing is, wanted to mention sort of how things go now that the season has begun. If you listened to this podcast the last couple of years, there are going to be some slight differences this season. One of them being, and I've hinted at this in the past, that this would be happening eventually on Fantasy NBA Today. It's going to start happening more this season, and that is we're going to get more takes on the show. It's not going to be exclusively about breaking down the results of the games and then just looking to the next night's games. We're going to be picking the brains of people who are a little bit more in tune with the individual teams than we are. You know, over the last couple of months, we've heard from reps from the Magic, the Rockets, the Hornets, the Raptors, the list goes on and on. That's going to be happening more now as we push our way into the season. We're going to be talking to more other fantasy analysts on the show just to get a different look at what's going on across the landscape. Just to get us a little bit of a different look at what's going on across the fantasy landscape, because last year you guys ended up hearing from me a lot, and I frankly think that you guys probably got a little bit bored of that. I would. I love the sound of my own voice. Total narcissist over here, and I was sick of hearing myself talk by the end of last season's episodes. We just had so many things going on that to try to schedule it all, me personally, this also sort of factored in to make sure that we could actually get all of the guests on the podcast and actually still get a show out with the different mismatched pieces last year. It was too difficult. This year, not so much. We got more hands on deck, able to take care of a few things, take those off of my plate here at Hoop Ball. And so that allows me now to go out, get some guests on the podcast. We're going to do more of that this season as well. We are, by the way, going to still look at box scores from the night before. I know we've got the box score breakdown now, and that's your quickest reaction to the box scores. Mine is going to be more focused on a couple individual plot lines. Let me explain myself on that. The box score breakdown that Adrian and Neil are putting together, that's going to give you a take on every game the night before. This is not that. What we're going to be doing on Fantasy NBA Today this year is pick out the key developments from the night before. Now, obviously, last night was an easy one because there were only 2 games, so simple enough. There were like 2 things that happened. At the beginning of the year, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on, too, because we're going to see minutes getting allotted. We're going to be reacting to guys that maybe we didn't know were going to be in the rotation, guys that we thought were going to see more minutes that ended up getting fewer. So there's going to be a lot of that at the beginning of the year. As the season progresses, you're going to see us focusing on, 2 or 3 things from the night before. We're also going to be segueing from that into the coming night. This is something you guys remember that we did a lot on last year's podcast during the season, and that was I basically assigned homework as we got into the sort of meat of the regular season, such as tonight. The Atlanta Hawks play the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. That game is at 4:30 Pacific Time, 7:30 Eastern. There are things we're going to be watching in that game. So your homework, if we were doing this last year, I might have said, okay, your homework tonight is to watch the Knicks and the Hawks. And many of you out there cringe at the thought of watching Knicks-Hawks. But this is a game where there is significant untapped fantasy value. Guys on the Hawks that may not have been drafted. Guys on the Knicks that may not have been drafted in your fantasy league. And watching the minute distribution, even just the first half, you get an idea of who's going to be getting the usage, who's going to be getting the shots. So that's the type of thing we do on a day-to-day basis. We're going to be looking back a little bit. We're going to be looking forward a little bit. We're also going to be looking at the betting lines for the coming night's games and offering a couple of thoughts on some of them. Again, we have to pare it down a little bit. Last year we mentioned everything, and it was mundane. It got boring. I don't want to talk about every single game on the card every single day when we have another podcast that does that. There are going to be some mailbag days. Today is one of them. There are going to be guests like Brewski as well. There are going to be live shows. Folks, remember, some of you already know this. Every Friday, we do this podcast live on YouTube. You can watch it and interact with the show. It's me, it's Aaron Brewski on Fridays. You can interact via a YouTube chat room. It's free. Last year we did it at 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific time. This year I think it's going to be a tiny bit later, if I'm not mistaken. We haven't set the exact date, but you got to follow me at Dan Vespers on Twitter, follow at Hoopball Fantasy, or at Aaron Brewski. Pretty much any one of those 3 will be able to get the alerts out to you on Fridays. The podcast will still be released in the format you're listening to it right now, whether that's iTunes, Google Play, whatever. But it's a lot more fun if you come and join the madness. There were a lot of people last year. I think there were a few shows where there were like 60 to 100 people that were just sitting in and watching live as it happened and sending questions. There was actually a day we had so many questions that YouTube prevented me from scrolling all the way back to the beginning of the chat. It got too long. That's order of business number 1 today. I wanted to spend 6-7 minutes here just giving all of the new listeners an idea of what they can expect. Because the last 5 weeks, we've really hammered draft results and ADP and all of that type of good stuff, and buzz guys and non-buzz guys and sleepers and old guys. You guys love my Dan Vespers old man squad. How many of you guys drafted the old man squad like I did? That does change a little bit now. We're past draft season. We're into the regular season. It's time for the format to tweak how we present all of the information to you. Okay, so today specifically, we have the mailbag. We have yesterday's 2 box scores. We have tonight's games, and we're going to go over all of that piece by piece. Chronologically makes the most sense. As we look back at yesterday's box scores, we see 2 games. A blowout. Boston beat the hell out of Philadelphia, 105-87, and Golden State, as mentioned earlier in the show, opened up a pretty good lead on the Thunder and then ultimately gave a lot of it away. I think they went into the fourth quarter tied in that ball game. And a lot of the questions from the mailbag focus on Game 2. Quickly here on Game 1. Big first game for Jason Tatum. Efficient first game. But at the same time, looking at the numbers for Tatum, I'm still a little bit concerned that he's not the focal point. I know that sounds stupid because he took the most shots on the team, which is a good sign, and he made a very high clip of them. But 1 steal, 1 3-pointer, no blocks. The 9 rebounds are nice. The 3 assists are nice. I'm a little bit worried that this was the Tatum game, right? Like everybody else on Boston, their defense was just awesome, and they didn't need much else. Marcus Morris had 16 and 10. Al Horford had 9 points and 5 blocks. Terry Rozier had 11. Gordon Hayward had 10 and 5 with 4 steals. Jaylen Brown had a dozen. Kyrie Irving had 7 points in this game on 14 shots. There's going to be a game, and it might be the next one, where he blows up for 30, and then you see Tatum have 12, and Hayward have 14, and Rozier have 6, and Marcus Morris have 4, and Horford has 11. There's so many guys on this team that relying on any one of them on any given night is a little bit of a crapshoot. So that, to me, is the big picture issue in Boston. We saw exactly what we were worried about in Game 1, which is that they scored 103 points, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I would argue 6, 7, 8 guys were heavily involved in the outcome of that ballgame. And an 8-man rotation, and I'm not talking about like just getting on the floor because they ultimately played 12 guys last night. 8 dudes played 25 minutes, basically. Marcus Morris had slightly fewer than that. But effectively, 8 guys were getting starter-level minutes. How is this going to change in Game 2 if the fourth quarter is a closer one? Well, presumably you'd see more Kyrie, more Gordon Hayward. But it's a mess, man. It's a mess. So you got a good one out of Tatum in Game 1. If some of you add Marcus Morris, kudos, because I don't think many of us thought he'd do enough to be relevant this year. And it's going to be a different guy basically every night. Meanwhile, over on the 76ers side, the Markelle Fultz experiment is off to a glowing start. 5 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal in 24 minutes. As I mentioned on this podcast, they need J.J. Redick on the floor. He played 30 minutes, so he outplayed Fultz in the minutes department. Redick had 16 points on 17 shots. Usually he's going to be a bit more efficient than that, but I still think he's going to be a pretty easy top 80 kind of guy. Redick, part of my old man squad, because he's just going to knock down a bunch of threes, and when they play a team that's not as great defensively as Boston, if he takes 17 shots, he's going to have 20 to 25 points. He probably won't take 17 shots every night. Meanwhile, Rob Covington, 2 threes, 2 steals, and a block. That's what you hope out of him. Joel Embiid had 23 and 10 with a steal and 2 blocks and 5 turnovers and low percentages. And Ben Simmons went nuts and tanked a category for you. 19 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists, 4 steals, 2 blocks on 7 out of 14 from the field, only 3 turnovers, and 5 for 11 at the foul line. Oof. Oof. He's going to be a behemoth in points leagues, but he will single-handedly lose you free throws. He will. That's funny. Like, that line is out of this world awesome, and it crushed you in a category. That's tough. That's tough. I hope you're punting. If you have him on a punt team, you're killing it after day 1. So upset that he got auto-drafted right in front of me in that Hoop Ball Staff League. I could have been sitting on LeBron and Ben Simmons 1 and 2. Oh, well. Game 2 on yesterday's card, Golden State 108, Oklahoma City 100. As I said 1,000 times during this offseason, I think Steph Curry is going to go bananas this year because he's pissed. He feels like he's been slighted for whatever reason. These guys need motivation, and you could see it in his eyes. He was annoyed that KD was getting all the love, that I said that he sucks in the playoffs or whatever it is, and so Steph went buck wild on day 1. 32 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists, a steal. KD was solid, 27 and 8 with a steal and a block, 9 out of 10 at the free throw line. Dennis Schroeder, filling in for Russell Westbrook, had a solid game, 21, 9, and 6 with 2 steals and a block. Bad shooting percentage in this one, but you can't complain much on that type of night. Paul George, 27 points, 4 steals, 4 3-pointers. If he doesn't go 5 for 8 at the free throw line, his line also would have been equally impressive. Steven Adams had 17 and 11. And not surprisingly, nobody else on Oklahoma City did much of anything, which is basically what you're going to see when Westbrook comes back and Schroeder becomes one of those guys who doesn't see quite enough minutes. So ride this one while you can, because this is the best line probably all year that you'll get out of Schroeder. Maybe not. Maybe Russell misses another game or two and Dennis one-ups himself. But I'd be surprised if you see him come away with that level of rebounding every night. The 2 threes, the 2 steals are above his career marks. This is a high water mark. This is one of the big ones. For Paul George, this could actually not be that far off from season-long total. You'll see slightly fewer 3-pointers, not going to average 4 steals a game, but I think his shooting and his free throw shooting will both be a little bit better. So pretty good game for Paul George. Nothing crazy there. The questions that are all coming in from yesterday's ball games focus almost exclusively on the Golden State Warriors' big men. Nobody seems to be all that worried about Klay Thompson, which, by the way, I have no shares of Klay Thompson this year. He's going to be fine, but he's also such a snooze fest in those early rounds that, you know me and my distaste for points anyway, but he's a good percentages guy. This is the low water mark. I know I don't like Klay, and I know everybody's like, see, he's going to be garbage this year. Technically, this would be a buy low for Klay Thompson. By the way, this is the ultimate buy low for Kyrie Irving, because everybody's in panic mode after day 1, where he played 29 minutes and had 7 points. Guys, this is Kyrie Irving. Guys, maybe you can prime away from somebody for your 4th round pick. They got him in the late 2nd, early 3rd. A brilliant move on your part. Doubt it works. I doubt anybody's really going to panic after one game, but if he does it twice, you might be able to get him. Same deal with Klay Thompson. You might be able to get him even right now. Draymond Green had 2 points in this game. 2 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals. You knew what you were getting if you got into the Draymond boat. But those aren't the big men I'm talking about. I'm talking, of course, about Damian Jones and Kevon Looney. And Jordan Bell. Can't talk about the Warriors' bigs without mentioning Jordan Bell. After day 1, the minute distribution for Warriors' big men: Damian Jones, 26 minutes. Kevon Looney, 18. Jordan Bell, 6. I was willing to suggest a flyer on Jordan Bell very late in drafts. He's a guy I did not end up with any shares of because the situation, by the way, is going to sort itself out when Boogie comes back in a couple of months. I think he's supposed to be back in December, they believe, and they'll ease him back in, and as they do so, all of these guys are going to go down the tank. But a month or two is not nothing, especially if you're in a roto format where you're just trying to pile up stats whenever you can get them. This was a game where the Warriors played a very good offensive rebounding big man in Steven Adams, and so they needed somebody on the floor that could keep him off the glass, somebody bigger than Draymond Green even. And so they didn't go with their traditional Draymond center lineup the entire game. They just couldn't get away with it against this particular opponent. As a result, Damian Jones had a really nice game, sort of JaVale McGee-like. 12 points, 3 boards, 2 assists, 3 blocked shots on 6 out of 7 shooting. That's a fantastic game from a fantasy perspective, and he played well for them in reality. Kevon Looney, double-double with 10 and 10, a steal and 2 blocks. life is not always going to be so simple. Here's the thing. Is Damian Jones going to play 26 minutes every single game? Probably not. Probably not. Got to be perfectly honest. I don't think he's just going to take over this job. The Warriors' next game, I believe, is against the Utah Jazz, which means they're dealing with another big front court of Derek Favors and Rudy Gobert. So you're going to see a lot of Damian Jones and Kevon Looney in that one again. I know that I'm about to look at a mailbag where the questions are all, what am I going to do with Jordan Bell? I would suggest you hang on for 3 games. Give the Warriors a chance to play somebody that doesn't have a traditional big man. Maybe that's 4 games. Maybe that's 5. Maybe that's 6. I mean, they're on a weird start to the schedule. Warriors play the Jazz on Friday, the Nuggets on Sunday. They have Jokic. Although in that game, you could basically get away with a slightly smaller dude. The Suns and DeAndre Ayton on Monday. The Wizards and possibly Dwight Howard next Wednesday. And then the Knicks next Friday. That's the first time you're going to see a team without... Well, they got Enes Kanter, I guess. In any event, I would say 3 games is your sample size here for Jordan Bell. I'm not willing to hang on to a guy who's only playing 7 minutes a game, but maybe they change their lineup construction based on their opponent, and you don't want to miss out if Bell suddenly does get the 26-minute run. What about Damian Jones? Well, he's worth a pickup, but I certainly wouldn't drop him into your league right away. He's one of those guys, we got to recover this ground. So, again, for those of you that have listened to this podcast for a long time, you know what I'm about to say. For those that are new to the show, I have what I like to call the tiers of free agent watch. The tiers of free agent watch go in basically 4 steps, which is the farthest step away is watch list, where I just kind of check the box score on any given night. The third step, as you start to approach actual pickup. Step 1, by the way, would be pickup. Maybe I should have counted the other direction. All right, step 4 is pickup. Step 1 is watch list. Step 2 is, okay, you've done it once. Let me see you do it again. Step 3 is I actually watch them in the game, laser focused on what they're doing on the court, and then step 4 is pick them up. And Damian Jones right now is somewhere around step 3, where I want to really pay attention to everything he's doing in the Warriors' next game and get a feel for what his role is going forward, how long it can last, whether or not there's going to be some matchup situations getting yanked around. Is Kevon Looney going to get 4 more minutes next game and Jones 4 fewer, or is it going to be even more than that? And if he passes those tests, then you pick him up. Now, because it's the beginning of the year, I think you can jump steps a little bit because you might have a guy on your team that just did nothing. Not really last night. Last night was sort of with only 2 games, it's tough to jump all the way to a conclusion. But tonight we've got all these games on the docket, and you might have a guy on your team that just doesn't play. In which case you're like, you know what? Screw it. I don't need this guy. I'm going to take a flyer on Damian Jones. So I think you can jump a few steps in between at this early part of the season because there really are going to be some massive surprises the first 2 to 3 games from each team, and you need to capitalize on those quickly. You can't wait around. Someone else is going to do it before you. So you have to be willing to make a move, but you also have to be careful with who you drop. So this is a really important time of year where you have 2 forces banging into each other. One of them is you got to make the moves quickly because someone's going to pop up here the first week of the season that nobody saw coming and is going to be a top 50 guy. It was basically Tyreek Evans last year. And the opposite thing, bashing its face into the first one, we got Nico Mirotic on one side and Bobby Portis on the other, is you might have a guy in your team who plays 2 terrible games to start the year and ends up a top 50 asset on the season. You don't want to drop that guy. So you have to be really careful. Look at who's getting actual opportunity versus who's not. That's how you make the call. 2 seasons back, I would use Rob Covington as an interesting example. 2 seasons back, Rob Covington got off to one of the worst starts I can possibly imagine. He shot like 17% for the first 5 to 10 games for the 76ers, but he was on the floor for 30 minutes every night. So you're looking at a guy and you're like, listen, if this number regresses anywhere near 38 to 42%, you got a massive fantasy asset. Just because he's playing terribly doesn't make him a drop candidate. The guys that are drop candidates are the ones that just aren't on the floor. And that's a big, big difference. So, looking back at last night again, Jordan Bell wasn't on the floor. So he's right now on the chopping block. Those other guys, even the Boston guys, are not, because they played 25 minutes. And it was a blowout, so we really need to see one more game before we can dig into that. Let's take a few questions from the mailbag, and then we'll look at tonight's games. I almost said tomorrow. I'm actually doing this podcast on the real day that it came in. That's actually kind of weird for me. A lot of them have been done the night before, but now that we got games going, we can't do that as easily. Let's see. Question number 1, should I drop Jordan Bell? See, we covered that already. Nerlens Noel, also in question number 1. That's a guy we didn't talk about from yesterday's games. Yeah, he's a drop for me, guys. I know that he can be a stat magnet in 20 minutes a game. I don't think he's playing 20 minutes when Steven Adams is healthy, and Adams plays through a lot of stuff. If we get word at any point this year that Adams is going to miss 2 to 3 games in a row, grab Nerlens Noel as fast as humanly possible and plug him in for a week, because he could easily go top 40 for a week while Steven Adams is out. But he's the backup. He is a traditional center backup who's not going to play power forward minutes. He's not built for that. And if you add his minutes to Steven Adams' minutes yesterday, you get 48 right on the nose. That is all center bucket minutes. There's just not enough for him. Sorry. This is the preseason playing tricks on you. He was never going to get a ton of minutes as long as Steven Adams was healthy. Question from J-Ball. How good is Steph Curry? That's sort of a facetious question, but the answer is very good. It's why I have money on the Warriors over this year, because I think as long as he's on the floor, they are almost unstoppable. How long of a leash to give Jordan Bell in a 14-team league? Okay, this is a different look at what we've already talked about. I know a lot of these questions are Jordan Bell related. The answer is a little bit longer, even, because in a 14-team league, you can't afford to drop a guy who might end up turning it around. But I'm telling you right now, as I just said, if someone comes along who's sneaky playing 28 to 30 minutes a game that we didn't see, you better grab that guy and drop the dude playing 6 minutes. Who will have the better shirts for Fun Shirt Fridays? This is a long-time listener. Remember I mentioned earlier on that we have live shows on Fridays? Well, I try to wear fun shirts on Fridays. I have a litany of goofy shirts that I've gotten either on the internet or Target. However, I like to try to wear the Hoopball logo more these days. So you'll see a lot of Hoopball logo shirts on the Friday shows. And what I'm going to try to do is have one of my fun shirts displayed prominently to the side. It's not going to be on me because, got to get the Hoopball logo out there. Got to rep the brand, as they say, as the kids say these days, 10 years, 15, 20 years ago. But I will have some fun shirts floating around so you guys can get a laugh either at me or with me. Players you think will pay off to hold, for example, Jordan Bell. Kyle Anderson seems like he might be getting a smaller role than expected. Is he a hold because he should have some value, or are there opportunities to sell here? Jordan Bell, I'm getting the feeling again, by the way, that I think he's going to end up being a drop, but I do think we should hold for longer than one game, unless something insane happens tonight, which it might. Kyle Anderson, you got to hold. They haven't even played a game yet. We're trying to read a lot from preseason tea leaves here. He's going to be on the floor for the Grizzlies. They gave him a nice contract to steal him away from the San Antonio Spurs, not to sit him down. Is he going to be as good as everybody thinks? No, he's not. Because last year in San Antonio, he ended up getting tasked with a lot of the playmaking. And I don't think that's going to be the case necessarily in Memphis, especially not here right out of the chute. But he's going to have a fine season. He's going to be an easy top 100 guy. So, no, you're not selling on him right now. Because, again, number one, they haven't played a ball game yet. And number two, if you're going to sell him, you wait until he has a hot stretch, which inevitably he will. They're not going to be those big eye-popping hot stretches. A hot stretch for Kyle Anderson is going to be like 8 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. And when you get one of those, you're going to have to try to convince somebody that defensive stats are sexy, which they are. You guys that listen to this podcast, I think all agree. Defensive stats are absolutely dead sexy, but they don't drive trade value. They don't move the needle as much as they should. Did the Dubs play their death lineup tonight? Yeah, just not as much as they might have normally. Are the Bucks going to win by 2 tomorrow? Jermaine, you're trying to get me into the line reading portion of the show. We'll get to that later on, so don't worry. Frank Ntilikina or Josh Jackson in a 13-team league? I would say Josh Jackson, because I'm not convinced that Ntilikina actually ends up playing starters minutes, despite the fact that he's starting as a small forward. I still think you're going to see a lot of Mario Hezonja and Kevin Knox in those spots, small and power forward. You're going to see Ntilikina see some more time at shooting guard and point guard. They're going to try to get him on the floor, but until he shows me he can do anything with his time on the court, I am not yet a believer. Not yet. What else we got in the mailbag? Here's an interesting one. Do you think it's fair to use a daily bidding system for waiver pickups? It's much better than the daily race to pick up the hot hand, where some people in each league tend to be quicker. What do you think? Well, I happen to enjoy first come, first serve. I think that's more fun. If you're going for the fairest, then you should have an auction draft, and you should have auction bidding on free agents as well. I don't have the time or thought for that. I don't. It's a very different kind of game. It's something that you guys would have to learn. I would recommend, if you're going to get into that and you're going to try to convince your league to do it, you should just have your league do a separate free league where you try out that format and see what people think. You're never going to convince a league of 12 people, or 11, since you don't have to convince yourself of anything. You're never going to convince a league of 11 other people to change from first come, first serve to auction if there's money on the line. People don't want to just throw money at something that they don't understand. So you're going to have to teach them about it, and then maybe you'll get them to make the switch. It is, by all accounts, the more fair way to have a fantasy league, but it's also less fun, because those of us that are sitting here and watching the games live on League Pass, we sometimes want to go grab a guy right away. And you know what? Sometimes that helps, and sometimes it doesn't, because sometimes you drop a guy that you end up wishing you had back. So what do I think? I think you should, but I also think you're never going to be able to. Is Derek White worth a stash? Does he have an upside worth stashing for? Nah. In terms of stash guys out there, that's a pretty questionable one. He's a guy that might, I would say there's like a 30 to 40% chance he has enough fantasy value to be rostered when he comes back. That's a pretty low probability to sit on a guy for a couple of months. If you're going to stash someone, it better be a sure bet. The only stashes worth doing are sure bet stash guys. The other, like if you're sitting on a dead roster spot for someone who might not even be relevant when they get healthy, that's a waste of a roster spot. Everybody's pretty high on Jonathan Isaac. What's your take on him? Do you think he can crack the top 60? Yes. Yes, I do. I am very high on Jonathan Isaac. He is a member of the Hoop Ball 6 this year, if I'm not mistaken, and he was my keeper in my keeper league that I'm in. I think he's going to have a fantastic season. He has one of those truly special fantasy stat sets where he can go completely bonkers on the defensive side. He can shoot the three. He can glide to the rim with his athleticism. He can rebound. He's not a bad foul shooter. He has an opportunity to sort of be unicorny in that, not like necessarily like Kristaps Porzingis, but unicorny in that he could be sort of one of a kind. There are very few guys out there that can just go bananas on the defensive side like that and also do other things. And I think Jonathan Isaac could be one of those guys. So I'm really excited about him. I think he started to get drafted a little bit too soon as everybody began to talk about him. So I didn't end up with him in a ton of places. I think I have him in about half of my fantasy leagues. But yeah, I think this is going to be a really good year for him. I don't know how day one is going to go while the Magic sort out their rotations. But eventually, and provided he can stay healthy, he's going to be a monster. Should I drop Jordan Bell to pick up Pat Beverly? Yeah, I think I would, actually. I know we haven't seen a Pat Beverly game yet this year, but we have seen a Jordan Bell game. It doesn't look like he's going to get free reign to get those big man minutes, and Pat Beverly is the point guard for the Clippers. He's going to play 25 to 32 minutes most nights. Avery Bradley, the shooting guard, and then generally you're going to see Lou Williams soak up all of the other guard minutes with a smattering going to the other bodies in Clipperland. Beverly's defense is going to keep him on the floor, and if you're on the floor for a bunch of time for a team that plays obscenely fast, the Clippers were the fastest team in the NBA from the All-Star break on last year. He's worth owning because that just means stats are out there. In a 16-team, 9-category punt assist build, should I drop Mo Harkless and stream Looney and Tucker? That is a very specific question for the mailbag, but my answer is no. Mo Harkless has the much higher ceiling. He's not known for his assists. It's not like you're dropping an assist guy. Mo Harkless is a defensive guy. 3-and-D. He'll get you steals, he'll get you blocks, he'll get you threes. A little bit of scoring. He did it on good percentages when he was healthy last year. PJ Tucker might not do anything. And Kevon Looney might not play when the Warriors go small. So no. You're not streaming those guys. Unless you absolutely feel like you have to stream things. I don't believe that this is the time of year to be streaming in a head-to-head situation. I think this is the time of year where you want to sit on the guys that have potential fantasy value and give them just a little bit of time, or grab more season-long guys. This is a season-long time of year, which seems crazy, I know, because it's the first week of the season, but this is the part of the year where guys that become full season values pop up. The middle of the season is when you see guys get injured and you can stream a guy for a week and you want to start maximizing games played because you have an idea of what everybody's fantasy value is. This is a time of year where there's so much variability. You want to be using all your roster spots to try to grab the best full season values and sit on them. Believe me, I am very pro streaming. You guys that listened to this show last season, you heard me go crazy during my head-to-head playoffs with streaming stuff. I put out a streaming calendar, which, by the way, is available for premium subscribers at Hoopball, and I'll tell you how you can be one of those in just a moment, to use my 4 moves a week to try to turn 2 roster slots into streaming spots and try to maximize, try to get like 10 games out of those 2 roster slots instead of 6 or 7 or whatever I was going to. And it was better than that. I did much better than that. I wrote it all out on a piece of paper, and now I don't remember what it was anymore. Let's see, what else we got in the mailbag? If I can pick 2 of the following 3 old men, which should they be? Rudy Gay, George Hill, Wes Matthews. I'm going Rudy Gay and George Hill from that list. I think Wes Matthews is a safe play in his mid to high 20s in minutes, but he's going to be a very low shooting percentage three-pointer and steals specialist. And Rudy Gay has an opportunity to be a lot of things on a Spurs team that's going to need him to play well. And George Hill, and I know that I'm not necessarily in the majority on this, but I don't think Colin Sexton is going to play that much right out of the chute. The Cavs want to try to win without LeBron James. They signed Kevin Love. They signed Larry Nance. They're going to play the old guys until they run out of gas. And I think George Hill's going to get 30-plus minutes a night when he wasn't just getting yanked around by the Kings or trying to figure out how to play with LeBron James. George Hill was a fantasy beast. And there's enough of an opening here with this team where he can be a little bit more aggressive. I think we have to take the chance that he's that guy for a couple of months. So you got to go Rudy Gay, George Hill on this one. That's my take on these guys are all off of the Dan Besbris old man squad. Montrezl Harrell or Bobby Portis for this season as the last guy on the roster. I'm going Robert because Montrez is a bit of a punt free throw guy, and he really doesn't do anything besides field goal percent and rebound. He's not on the floor enough to positively impact your scoring. He doesn't do enough on the defensive side in his limited time, more steals than blocks generally. Bobby Portis is not great on the defensive side, but I just think he's going to have more opportunity. And as we've said, those are the guys you're looking for right now, the guys with a ton of opportunity. How many minutes do you think Trey Lyles will get? He's looked so good. Millsap looked a little off. I think Millsap's going to be fine, so let me start with the second half of that question. Paul Millsap is still the uncontested starter on that team, but here's the thing. We worry a lot about this bench starter stuff. Trey Lyles can play small forward, power forward, and center if they wanted him to, because he's sort of tall and lean, which gives him some flexibility on the floor. If he plays the 18 minutes that Paul Millsap isn't on the floor at power forward, and if he plays 5 minutes at center that's not Jokic or Plumlee, and he plays 4 minutes at small forward, then he's mid to high 20s in minutes. So my guess this year, I think Trey Lyles is going to play probably 26 to 29 minutes per game, and I do think that's enough for him to have fantasy value. He's remade himself a little bit as a very efficient scorer with an outside shot. It's points, it's rebounds, it's three-pointers. It's hard to get really late in a draft. So where he's going in fantasy drafts, I think he could actually end up being a decent value. Let's see. Anything else? Nope. That's the last letter in the mailbag. Woof. All right, good. Because I'm a little bit tired. Let me take a moment here. I mentioned the premium product over at Hoopball. This is an opportunity for us to do a little bit of a promo. The in-season premium product is available at hoop-ball.com. You click on the premium tab and choose Go Premium, and then select in-season premium membership. It is awesome. It is so packed. It is easily the most filled in-season premium membership anywhere across the fantasy landscape. There's a lot of them out there. Hoopball will do more for you than everybody else, and here is why. Hoopball has daily premium written content, which everybody else has as well. But Hoopball also has daily premium live interactive video content, which not everybody offers. What do I mean by that? Well, every Monday throughout the season, Aaron Bruski and myself host a weekly lineup show where you can come and ask us questions live on video about who you should get into your lineup for that week, or any other questions that pop into your head. Every Sunday, we have a weekly waiver show where we tell you who to pick up and drop and the notes on the week in review. And every single weeknight, with the exception of Friday, because we have a live free show in the middle of the day, every other weeknight, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 2 of Hoopball's best pros will come together live on video for premium subscribers and answer questions about the games that just happened, their personal lives, whatever you want to know, you can ask them through Hoopball, through YouTube, all part of the premium package. It also includes DFS content, including live forum chats leading up to DFS Lock Day and written pages on DFS picks every night. It is so awesome. It is $5 off right now, and it is $3 more off if you use any of the millions of coupon codes that we've given out on this podcast. Spida was the one we gave out yesterday. Neil we've given out. I've got the whole list right in front of me here, and I'm going to rattle them all off to you as fast as humanly possible. Here are all the coupon codes. Any one of these is good for $3. You use whichever one you want. Mello, LeBron, Wingspan, Jimmy, Haymaker, Brow, Nurse, Red Rock, Sharich, Alex, S-Man, Fultz, Noroff, MCWML, ITL, JJJ, Mark, Kyle, Rusty, Spida, Neil, Chef, Hoopla, Millman, and DFS Mike. Any one of those is $3 off your in-season premium pass over at hoop-ball.com. Go check it out. Get it. Enjoy it. You'll be happy you did. Last thing I want to talk about on today's podcast is tonight's games. Anything to keep an eye on, and anything on the betting side. I have an early season betting tenet that I want to throw into the mix here in the podcast. I tend to bet on the teams that have had a lot of roster stability and fade the teams that have had significant roster turnover, because the preseason doesn't really establish the chemistry for those newly built teams that you may think from watching them play, because sometimes they actually win a few games. That's just because those teams with new players, they tend to play harder in the preseason to try to figure out how to play together. The teams that have been together for a long time usually get off to slightly better starts. They end up being better wagers against the spread. So, looking at this slate for tonight, Brooklyn is in Detroit, Memphis is at Indiana, Miami in Orlando. The Hornets are hosting the Milwaukee Bucks. The Raptors host the Cleveland Cavaliers. Knicks and Hawks, we mentioned that game earlier, is in New York. Houston and New Orleans, that's a good one. That's a nice one starting things out. San Antonio, Minnesota. Sacramento is hosting the Utah Jazz. Heaven help the Kings this year. Clippers hosting the Nuggets, and Dallas is in Phoenix to take on the Suns. Which of these teams have really had a ton of stability year over year? Not Brooklyn, not Detroit. They got a new coaching staff in there. Memphis, sort of, although a lot of the guys kind of coming back from injury. Indiana's had a fair amount of stability, but laying 7 points to a Grizzlies team that I think is going to be better than people think, not my favorite. Miami, Orlando. Miami's fairly stable. So is Orlando, though. Milwaukee, Charlotte. Both of those teams, I would say, pretty stable. Although, I will say, I do like Charlotte getting points at home in their home opener here without Dwight Howard. Milwaukee's going to be pretty good this year, though. Cleveland, not stable. Toronto, not stable at all. Knicks and Hawks, nope. Houston, New Orleans, yeah, I could argue both relatively stable year over year. Spurs, nope. Wolves, nope. Utah, hell yeah. Sacramento, oi. Denver, yes. Clippers, nah. Dallas, no. Phoenix, no. So not a ton of stability, and the few teams that are tend to be playing one another on this night. At a quick glance, looking down the lines, Charlotte at home is one that jumps out. San Antonio, although we really don't know what's going on the Jimmy Butler side with Minnesota. I can't believe that he's really going to play well with these with other kids, right? Plays well with others. I don't think it's going to get a check mark there. Denver by 1.5 in LA taking on the Clippers. That's a weird one. This is a line to me that says odds makers think the Clippers might actually be a little bit better than people are giving them credit for, and I'm inclined to believe that because Patrick Beverley is straight up nuts. And then Phoenix by 1 hosting the Mavericks. The Suns are a 1-point favorite at home. I'm actually inclined to lean Dallas slightly in that ball game, but I'm not really making any wagers here right out of the chute. I prefer to let things settle just a tiny bit. I know there are folks that are like, but this is when the lines are the most off. Yeah, but there's also so much variability at this time of year. You've got all these first-day jitters. If anything, you should consider betting unders, as people can't hit shots their first game of the year. Both games, by the way, last night went under the total by a lot. It's like 20 points in the first one and 10 points by the second one. So I would say, if anything, you look at the unders here at the start of the year and then worry about actually betting the spreads after teams solidify themselves a little bit. In terms of players that I'm watching, right, homework part of the equation for this evening, Brooklyn, obviously, we're watching the backcourt more than anything else. Is Shabazz Napier healthy enough to play? I don't believe so. D'Angelo Russell and Spencer Dinwiddie are big factors. They've got some new bodies in Brooklyn that could turn out to be fantasy values. Detroit, what about Reggie Bullock? Is he going to play enough to be fantasy relevant? Memphis, Slow-Mo. A lot of questions about Slow-Mo right now. Is he going to play enough to be good? Indiana, everybody's doubting my boy Thad Young. I don't think you should. Miami, so many mouths to feed. Can Josh Richardson stay above the fray out there? And how healthy is Hassan Whiteside? Orlando, Jonathan Isaac, Evan Fournier, Aaron Gordon, DJ Augustine. There's so many questions on this Magic team. This is such a big time of year to watch guys for fantasy value. Charlotte, what's the role going to be for Marvin Williams, for Cody Zeller, for Willie Hernan-Gomez? Not a ton of questions on Milwaukee, actually. Toronto, can anybody have fantasy value besides Lowry, Kawhi, Jonas Valanciunas, and maybe Serge Ibaka? Cleveland has a ton of fantasy questions beyond Kevin Love. Is George Hill going to play enough? Is J.R. Smith going to play enough? Is Colin Sexton going to play at all? Larry Nance is hurt for this ballgame, so is Tristan Thompson going to play? Is Rodney Hood going to take 20 shots? I can't wait to see how these games go. This is such a critical night for pickups and drops. The Knicks, Kevin Knox is coming off the bench, and Frank Ntilikina is the starting small forward. That's lunacy. Is it going to stick? Is Trey Burke going to get 15 shots in this game? Can Tim Hardaway Jr. finally put his foot down this season? How great is Enes Kanter going to be? By the way, spoiler alert, pretty great from a fantasy perspective. The Atlanta Hawks, John Collins is out for a week. So Dwayne Dedmon should be pretty good to start the year. Taurean Prince, how's he going to play? What's Trae Young going to do besides soiling himself at some point? How much Jeremy Lin are we going to see? New Orleans, how does Niko Mirotic coexist with Julius Randle? Is anybody going to get punched in the face? What about Carmelo Anthony for the Houston Rockets? Minnesota, questions abound. San Antonio, who's going to play point guard? Is it all Patty Mills? Are they going to go point guardless? Are we going to see Pau Gasol running the offense? Utah, no questions there. Well, that's fun. Thank goodness for that. Sacramento, no kings allowed. Stay away. Stay away. Denver, Trey Lyles, he came into the mailbox today. There's a question. Clippers, how many shots is Pat Beverly going to take? How many shots is Avery Bradley going to take? How many shots is Danilo Gallinari going to take? And Tobias Harris? Is Marcin Gortat going to play more than 22 minutes? Dallas, that whole team is a question. Phoenix, that whole team is a question. What's Trevor Ariza's role going to be? Is Ryan Anderson going to play? Can DeAndre Ayton handle DeAndre Jordan in his first game? The battle of the DeAndres that we've been waiting for I don't know how many years. How old is DeAndre Ayton? 19? That many years. So many questions. Is any Phoenix point guard going to be on the floor enough to matter? These are all the things that are bouncing around in my cavernous head right now. And this is why we have to watch the box scores, watch the games, see them as they're happening. We might have our answer by halftime in a lot of these games. And you don't want to wait until the end of the night. That's why homework is such a big deal. Your homework tonight is to watch all of these scores as they are happening. Refresh constantly, because this might be the night where a top 50 guy pops up that could totally change your fantasy team for the whole year. Now, what if you had Tyreek Evans for the first 4 months last year before they basically shut him down? Game changer. Game changer. What if you picked up Donovan Mitchell a couple weeks into the year last season? That's when these guys pop up, guys. It's now, and it's All-Star break. These are the windows where the massive season-long guys emerge. In between that, you've got the little blips, the guys that surface and then go back underwater and then surface and go back underwater, and there's all the little tweaks you got to make during the year. But this is the ripest of the ripe. This is the time. We got to watch all of these box scores like you got nothing else going on. which none of us do, but here we are. And that's your show, ladies and gentlemen. Kept it under an hour by a couple of minutes. It's also the part of the program where I get down before you on bended knee, as I've done every day the last week and a half, and say, please, pretty please, pretty please, with a cherry on top, or whatever fruit you prefer, because cherries aren't that good. Pretty please, with some pineapple on top. Please subscribe to the podcast if you like what you hear. And please, if you like the podcast, drop us a positive review on whatever service you're using to listen to it. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The subscriptions allow the podcast to stay on leaderboards longer. More people can find it. It's how we can continue to grow the show, do more things, get more guests, and power the locomotive here, because we still don't even have advertising on this podcast. Someday, perhaps. And if you're interested, by the way, in advertising on the podcast, not that you would, because your guys just sitting out there doing fantasy sports, but maybe you guys are in charge of marketing for an organization, hit me up. We're always looking for it. I'll throw your business name out there. I don't care. I'll shill for you. I am Dan Besbris. This was your Wednesday edition of Fantasy NBA Today. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to talk to Josh Millman about the Career League. What the hell is that? And also, of course, fantasy basketball. And then Friday, it'll be our first live show of the year on YouTube. Live and free. Fantasy NBA Today live on Friday. Coming up pretty close to lunchtime. Stay tuned to Twitter at Dan Besbris and at Hoopball Fantasy for updates on when that show is coming. And that'll get you to the weekend. NBA has begun. Enjoy the first big Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.